Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, maggots, weirdos, and of course, those dog-faced pony soldiers.
All right. I need to ask you, this is kind of the insider thing, but did you listen to that little clip of the AI of our show at all?
I did not. I couldn't make it work.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, so just for edification of people out there, there is a site. It's called Notebook LLM or Notebook LM for the large language model, and what it does is it can take material like that written. I think it can take video or whatever audio links, and it then crunches it and into something of a podcast that will be up to 10 minutes with AI hosts, a male and a female AI host. So what I did was I took the topics we had from the last show and I just attached it to that and took a few minutes for it to digest and pull it all together. But it was a rather amusing. They only did about 4.5 or 5 minutes, I think, of this. But it was interesting.
We can be condensed to 4.5 minutes. Yeah. That's good to know.
Yeah, to take the nearly 1 hour show into 4.5 minutes. But it was interesting to see what happens with artificial intelligence and how much it can generate and pull. I think part of it too is that because the topics list is relatively short and in terms of also is very truncated language, right? It's not like sentences. It's just here's a topic, here's a topic, here's a topic. So AI has to figure out what the heck do they mean by this,
right?
That type of thing. So they don't have a lot of information to go on, and they get to do that. Now, had I fed in the show itself, I think we would have had 10 minutes, a very different 10-minute show like that and everything. So yeah, it was it's interesting to see how AI is doing these things. Artificial intelligence continues to change the world, and there's just so much money being thrown at it, and you just kind of see so many different aspects of what is happening now. And I have to admit,
it's pretty scary too.
Yeah, it is. Well, look, I mean, okay, so and that's what I was getting to. I mean, here's the next scary part. I don't know if you've seen this or not, heard about this or not. So I think somebody ran a test or an experiment or something like that, and they took the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, the Meta glasses, which basically you wear and you can take video, you can ask the Meta AI questions and things like that. It's not like the Google Glass of years ago, which was a little more like spying on people because they didn't know you were doing anything potentially nefarious. Whereas these Ray-Bans, I think, anytime you're doing anything like recording, I think there's a little light that lights up. So you get something that tells other people that, oh, there's something going on there. They're not just normal glasses. But these AI experts or whoever they were, I didn't go through the whole thing. I had heard, the synopsis of the story is that they hooked it up to some consumer databases, and I guess they use this thing called PIM eyes. And what happens is that by doing that is that they could look at a person, that then the glasses would do facial recognition, and it would tap the database. So it could say, oh, this is you never met before, maybe this is Brian McNichol. He lives in Virginia. He works at so and so. His address is here. It just pulls all this information. Can you imagine that? I mean, it's just like, okay, you and I and everybody else out there knows that there's a lot of our information is pretty readily available consumer databases because of
especially people like us who put ourselves out a little bit.
Yeah, we put ourselves out there, but
publish stuff and
once you have your credit card transactions and other things like that, stuff that gets fed off into various databases, There's hacks that have occurred, obviously, and stuff has been pulled to the dark web, and it's just kind of an insane thing that we're going through. But the very thought of, you could potentially just look at a person. You don't even have to talk to them. You could just, you could be in a room and you could just start looking around, and it would start telling you all this information about all these people. I don't know.
And it's like, I don't know if you saw it, the Jets fired their coach in the last couple of days, right?
Right.
And so there's an AI press conference of him. He was sharing some thoughts in that AI press conference that I don't think he would say in real life. But, so you're going to get stuff like that, fakes. So,
well, yeah. And I think I may have said this before. I don't know. You look at television shows or whatever, they are incorporating AI storylines, plot lines into their shows, particularly like if they're, say, crime shows, crime dramas or whatever. Guy like Dick Wolf, who produces, bunches of crime shows. Those things are popping up because it's out there. It is part of real life, and where things are, where voices are being faked and things are happening, and trying to convince people. I mean, this is something that I'm not really sure what the solution is, but it's something that people need to be aware of, and just, it used to be, we grew up at a time where we could trust pretty much. You pick up the phone, you could more or less trust the person on the other side, even if it was a salesperson. They're probably relatively trustworthy. Now it's, phishing scams and all kinds of stuff trying to steal your money and all these other things.
Yep.
So it's a very, very different world than where you and I grew up, and things that our children and our grandchildren, will face bigger challenges with. All right. So enough of that. We are, so we had the 1-year anniversary of the attack from Hamas on Israel. And there were some protests, and there's all some kinds of things going on here. Israel is trying to pick up the pace a little bit. They're, and fighting back against Hamas and Hezbollah on this. But there's still a lot of, misinformation and bad information out there about who started what and who the bad guys are. And it's really a shame. We've discussed this at length on the show. But I don't know. I mean, this doesn't seem that there's going to be a quick end to this. We're 1 year in here. Israel's trying their best to do things, but our administration isn't really helping them trying to bring this to a quick resolution, because they want negotiation with the people who want them off the map, as you have said many times. So I don't know how long this is going to go on, but it's going to go on for a while.
I do. 1/20/25. It starts getting a lot different that day, because we'll go back to seeing Iran properly as the bad guy and isolating them and taking away their money and taking away their ability to work their mischief in the rest of the world. I guess they're pretty much, the Israelis since the last time we had a show, is pretty much cut off the leadership faction of Hezbollah, right? I guess they were all having a meeting in a bunker, and Israel bombed the bunker. They were just looking to kill one guy, but they hit the jackpot and they killed a lot of people. So they're now looking for leaders, right? They're trying to reform and find people who can carry it forward. And it's not that safe a job, right? It's looking like it's a job with a pretty short lifespan at this point. And B, lead them to what, right? I mean, those people know what's going on in the election here. They know that things are about to change. The approach toward Iran and the whole Middle East is about to change dramatically in U.S. foreign policy. And they know that, the next administration is going to want Israel to win, and there's going to want, and this is important, and want Iran to lose, want Iran to pay for what it's done, and to back up, go back in the corner and sit silently again, like they were doing the last time Trump was president. So, Iran, they kind of got desperate to make this end soon too, right? and now they can't. And Hezbollah is on its last legs, and Hamas is shoved into a corner of southern Israel, and the Israelis are close to finishing the job. They're still getting bombed every day. They're still getting their bombs shot into Israel every day, and they're still trying to clean it up. But they're closer. I used to tell my kids we go on these trips, we're closer than we've been all day. They're closer than they've ever been.
Yeah, so that actually is interesting because I hadn't really thought about it that way on terms of, January 20th of next year. But that you make a good point there. So now I'm just trying to, it's roughly then, between now and then we've got what, 50, 80, something like 110 days or whatever it is before January 20th. So that makes me wonder now, after what you've just said, whether or not, what we're seeing here are things going on here where on the war front, these countries are trying to kind of in a mad scramble saying like, that's where the clock is. The clock is ticking,
Right.
26 days until the election, but about 100 or so days until the next president assumes power. And so that's what it is. What do we do in this little time frame? That's all we've got, because after that, everything probably changes.
Right.
Russia has probably got the same thinking, right? I mean, Putin's probably thinking like, I'm running out of time.
Right. Because they couldn't move against, he couldn't move against Ukraine when Trump was president the first time.
Yeah.
And now, whatever he hasn't gotten finished by January 20th, he's not going to get to finish because he'll be driven out again. It's pretty funny that the left has come out. I guess there's a new Bob Woodward book where he says, Trump sent Putin a COVID test. We were mailing them out. So I love the Democrats. Like, we were running out of COVID tests, and he sends one to Putin. And it's like, we were putting them in the mail for free. So we weren't short of COVID tests. And who cares if Putin has one? And this thing about the 7 phone calls, it's a, typical Bob Woodward. There's not a single name source for any of it. It's just, his imagination or whatever. And, they're behind in the election and they're talking about Russia again. They think, they can't explain, like, how did Putin take, Georgia under W, Crimea under Obama, Ukraine under Joe, who didn't dare make a move under Trump. Somehow Trump is Putin's patsy, right? That's their argument. And I think American people are waking up to the fact that that argument doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah. No, I mean, the COVID testing is like, who really cares about that? Yeah. I mean, so maybe the optics, code optics maybe look a little bad, but even then, that's still a very weak argument for that, because you just, as you said, and I think we're doing it again now. I think COVID tests, you can request them by mail again. We have the ability to ramp this up. The government was subsidizing this thing. It would be very easy for anybody here that's got a tie to Putin anyway to go to get extra tests and even just send him a bunch of tests if that's what he wanted. I mean, so that, there were times when there were plentiful supply of these COVID tests, and and there are a lot of people who in America who
we threw a bunch of them out because they weren't valid anymore.
Look, I have friends, and you probably do, who never wanted to get the shot. Right? They didn't even
get the shot.
Yeah. So, and they're fine. And so, this is one of those things. Is like, okay, quit trying to manufacture this thing. But this is Bob Woodward's style, right? I mean, you mentioned this, lacking the real sources, not naming the sources. But it's Bob Woodward, Mr.
The middle of October of an election year,
Yeah,
that's Bob Woodward there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, he's still living off of Watergate from 50 years ago, right? I mean, his reputation was made there, and so he's been able to do that. And how many times in his career have things been called into question? The thing about William Casey on his deathbed and all these kinds
Right,
of
right.
things, right? So you have
Yeah,
these
never
images.
quite. I mean, the stories are told in a way that's very hard to check them, right?
Right.
But then when you do check them, you find out no, that's not what happened. We're farther on down the road, and so yeah, we know. That's the thing about that is the power to sting of those kind of attacks is being lost, right? Because they've been caught in so many lies now that when Bob Woodward comes out with something, the leftists all, spike the football for 24 hours and everybody else kind of shrugs because, if you just wait about 24 to 48 hours, the facts will start coming in and that won't have been the case.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking even now too, like, we get into this October surprise thing, Hillary was all agog about, there's going to be there'll be some information on Kamala that, the Republican operatives or conservatives will come up with and all this kind of stuff. And then Jack Smith releases, more information on the indictment and he's trying to file back, on the things of why Trump, committed criminal acts while he was in office and things like that. And I thought, okay, but that seems to have gone away, right? I mean,
But the Jack Smith?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it didn't have a very long tail,
Right.
so I think Smith failed. I think
Yeah.
I think he really wanted to damage Trump here, as they get into the last couple month and a half of the campaign, and they got news coverage, but we've moved on.
Yeah. Nobody cares. Didn't move the polling numbers. It's just kind of out there. People know that it's, they really have taught us a lot about civics, right? Because we now understand that, none of what he's saying has been, tested. The other side has not seen this stuff and said, hey, no, he was in Puerto Rico that day. He couldn't have done this. And right. They haven't had any of that kind of vetting of this information. He's just putting it out there because he knows he'll never get Trump to trial for it.
Yeah. All right. I normally start off with the weather, and I got sidetracked by AI, but I think we need to address the weather situation here. So we just went through Hurricane Helene down south, coming through Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, some pretty devastating results there.
And was controlling the air around here
right
until about 2 days ago at the most.
Yeah.
Right now it's crispy fall outside, right? 60s.
Nice.
Yeah, nice.
It's actually it's gotten to that point again where it's like, okay, I leave the house at 4:30 to go to the gym, and I'm like, I got to wear a jacket,
Yeah, you definitely got to wear a jacket.
It's like 47, 48 degrees, and I'm looking at the forecast ahead. I'm like, it's going to get even chillier in the morning on some of these mornings. I'm like, oh yeah, I was like, it won't be very much longer at this rate before it's going to stay. I wonder if it just early mornings are going to be low to mid 40s for a while, and as we see the progress as we make through the weather, but makes for nice 60 to 70 degree days. I love that. I love that aspect of it.
Yeah, but that thing controlled our weather for 2 solid weeks, and we're about to get another one.
Yeah, right. And so now we've got a Category 5, Hurricane Milton, and it's off the coast of Florida, headed towards Tampa. It could veer a little south of that. That storms are. These things can do that, but as they show you the chart, it'll still hit Florida nevertheless with a pretty fair amount of impact. And so people are taking heed. They are evacuating wide swaths of Florida. You've got 30% of the gas stations down there don't have any gas. It's more than 1,000 stations.
DeSantis has state troopers accompanying the gas trucks around to keep the gas stations.
I just heard that. Yeah, I just heard that. This is valuable.
Also, it looks like as the storm approaches the coast, it's going to lose some power. It should only hit as a Cat 3. So, which is Cat 3 is a big bad storm, especially considering a lot of these people, their worldly belongings are stacked for removal right now, right out from the last hurricane. So, there's the parts of Florida, like it's going to hit St. Augustine, which is, it's a lot of like small 1-story houses, and those people got nowhere to go. The water's got nowhere to go. So, it could be a tough storm for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is literally just a huge 1-2 punch for people who already took it from Helene. They are trying to clean up all that debris that's from the curbs from the last hurricane. So they're working fast because they don't want them to become projectiles for when Milton hits. You're right. So Category 3 is probably going to be maybe in the 80-mile range.
Well, 80 to 90, and and all that stuff.
I mean, I think it's at 150.
It doesn't matter that it's blowing; it matters what's blowing.
Yeah, going down. It'll be a big come down from 150 at Category 5 or so to 80. Yeah. But 80, I mean, once again, so I've said before, wind and water, very powerful forces, and you cannot joke around with that stuff.
You can't joke around.
Yeah, and tornadoes hit that stuff. I mean, that picks that stuff up, and whoo, you never know where that stuff is going to wind up going. So it becomes.
That's the other one, down in Florida. DeSantis ordered all the landfills to stay open 24/7, right? Yeah. Right. So Pinellas County decided, we don't like DeSantis. We're going to close our landfill. So he went and cut the fence apart and reopened it. Put state troopers there to guard it and make sure it stayed open. We come on in, fellas. So, I mean, you can't let these people get in the way of this, right? At this point, I mean, this is a matter of life and death. You got to get that stuff. If you can get it to a landfill, get it to a landfill, right? And then try to not be downwind or upwind or whatever the wrong wind is from the landfill, right? But I mean, the idea that like you're gonna defy him and have a political argument now, and then you have Harris trying to call DeSantis, to see what he needed. Like, lady, I've been having hurricanes every year you've been in office, and you've never picked up the phone. But now that you want to look all attentive so you can win an election, you're picking up the phone, and I'm kind of busy. So, I mean, I don't know. She had a bad day yesterday. She had some interviews that didn't go well. That this call controversy has not worked out for her. Just generally no good day for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a few minutes too. Yeah, I mean, Florida. So because of Helene and now because of Milton coming, so I see a lot more stories about the after effect of the storms and what people have lost. I mean, one thing is that a lot of people were underinsured or just uninsured to begin with. So there are a lot of people from Helene that lost everything. Other people who lost a lot. I mean, in terms of they'll have to wrangle with their insurance company for payments, but it probably will still not cover the totality of their losses of rebuilding their homes and whatnot. But there's also this other effect. I mean, so because of the pandemic and some other things, Florida has been a mecca for people to move to. Their population was expanding. They're getting more congressional seats, etc. That growth could possibly stall, at least temporarily, if not more longer term, because of the effect of these storms. Because the part of this is that it's been pushing up insurance prices, which have become a huge problem in Florida. Home insurance and flood insurance is very, very expensive there. I was reading a story in the Journal from a guy who moved from Virginia to Florida during the pandemic and has just recently needed to move back to Virginia for his job. And I think he sold his house at a slight loss. So he'd only had the house for 2 or 3 years, and he'd put money into it too to refurbish it. But because of the storm and what he had where it was located and the damage and all this stuff, there were no buyers. It was very, very difficult to find buyers. So where there were buyers before, there are not buyers right now. People, I think, are saying, let's wait a minute. Let's see what happens here. This was a very bad weather pattern here. Boom, boom. If it smooths out, maybe we'll consider moving to Florida again. So they may have a small hiccup there, in their growth pattern, thanks to these storms. I don't know. I mean, you just see these figures from Helene where they're saying that up to $15-16 billion in damage. Milton comes through here and adds more insult to injury. You know, I don't know. And I was reading a story about some woman. She looks pretty young, and she had like 8 trees fall on her house or fall in the backyard or whatever. And I'm thinking, like, once again, this is why, even though I don't live in a heavy tornado or whatever area, every house we've looked at, if there's a tree close to the house, we've gotten rid of it. No. We're not allowed to get rid of the trees in the back that could possibly come down, but we don't have.
They're below you though, right?
Well,
the way the yard goes.
We have trees. I mean, they're pretty tall. And they just, that's why I spent money in the last couple of years bringing people in to trim back the branches and things like that. Because I look up and I'm like, oh, I don't like how they just continue to kind of grow towards her. I just want to keep them back as far as I can. And those trees are they're basically governed by the park and planning the parks, so I can't like remove them. They're there because this used to be, I guess, some kind of park as part of a parkland or agricultural preserve. So you can't really do much about that, except I can try to keep them from saying big branches from falling down on the house or as they get to encroach and stuff like that. So but I don't see other neighbors doing it. It's like, even just a heavy rainstorm, I mean, stuff, tree limbs, they snap. Yeah. And they could fly all over the place. I'm like, I'm trying to minimize the damage that these darn things can do. And I still remember a big tree in the front of our first house. And before we occupied the house, we told the builder to take out the tree, and it wasn't in very good shape anyway. And they were just kind of like, why? It's brings shade and things like this. The tree in the front of the house was, I don't know, 20 feet away from the front of the house. And when we had Hurricane Isabel, we had a house that was 2 doors down. They had a front porch. They had a tree that was similar but larger. And a part of that tree came right down through their front porch. And I'm thinking, like, that just proves what I said before, is that I don't want anything close to my house. even when they offered to plant a tree in front of the house, they were coming around. That part of their thing. We're like, no, just give it to somebody else who wants a tree, not us. We're trying to keep our lot fairly tree free, just so that we don't have anything coming close. So I know Americans love shade trees and the whole 9 yards, but I drive around. You've driven around. I just get concerned about all the tree canopies that are everywhere, where old trees are not really maintained, as to how much of the stuff can come down and do damage.
That's a big problem in Maryland. Like, Virginia is pretty aggressive about dealing with that, but Maryland, it's been a problem for years, and DC too.
Yeah. Maryland is not very good at that, and unfortunately, it'll take a tragedy, because we had one many, many years ago where huge limb came down and killed a young mother in a minivan during a heavy storm. Could have been avoided if they had actually done some maintenance, but they did. So these are things that can happen, and you just have to be careful with all of that. All right. Do want to talk just briefly about SCOTUS. So, first Monday in October, they're back. They don't have a really heavy agenda or docket right now. I mean, they're hearing arguments on ghost guns. It seems almost as that they're keeping it a little bit light, just in case maybe we have some election things that they may have to decide.
I don't know about that. I think that a lot of big stuff has been decided the last few terms.
They have some heavy things.
Yeah, I don't know that they're keeping the decks clear for election stuff. They may be. I do know they're still going to start off with this. I guess they had a hearing yesterday on the ghost guns thing, and they appear likely to uphold the Biden administration ban on them. I don't know about that. I mean, if you can make guns outside of the gun making regime, right, and escapes the laws. I don't know. It's a competing of rights questions. I personally think no gun law is the right gun law. So, it's hard for me to decide with it, but it's hard. It's also, I can see where, given the jurisprudence and the law, the way the laws and the regulations are written, where they would side with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think was it Alito that talked about the ingredients of an omelet?
Yeah.
I thought, that was kind of funny. I mean, it's like, so I have the cheese, I have the peppers, and does this make this a Western omelet? Just because I have the pieces, right? I have all the ingredients. Does that make this a Western omelet? So, I mean, Proligar had to try. She's had to argue back against some of these things that the justices have said about this. But yeah, I mean, the ghost gun things, I think it's a little tricky in the one sense. But I do agree with you. There isn't a good gun law, and
Right.
there must be a better way of dealing with this. But yeah, it does look like that they will side with them, but that's just based on the arguments. We don't really know until it's finally decided. They could completely reverse course as time goes along.
Right. And they
So
have.
in the past. So we'll have to kind of wait and see how that goes. I loved seeing Elon at this Trump rally. That was just great. That was just incredible. Got his black MAGA, gear out and everything like that.
Yeah.
And the crowd was huge.
Yeah, they were. They had, looks like it was about 60,000 given the amount of cell phones that were there, and all of them within close driving distance. So no one bust in. Legit, authentic crowd. Went berserk when he was on stage. I think people are starting to embrace this, and I'm worried about it at the time because Musk and RFK Jr. kind of signed up for Trump at the same time, within a few days. And I was wondering if the effects of those two would make it into the public square in sufficient strength in time before the election to where people would take that into account when they made their vote. And especially with Kennedy, right? Because Kennedy joined forces with Trump because Trump agreed to join with him on calling for better food and so forth, right? The things that Kennedy cares about. So Trump appears to be satisfying Kennedy on his end of the bargain. Kennedy is going around preaching this for Trump, and you can finally see like people starting to say, yeah, part of Trump's thing is he wants to make America healthy again, right? It's finally starting to make some sense. And then when you have a guy like Musk there, it says, okay, whatever you think of Musk, somebody had this on there too the other day, like Elon Musk is dumb. It's like, well, Elon Musk bought the platform you're saying that on, right? And they didn't want to sell it. He bought it when no one wanted to sell it, right? So he paid top dollar for it, and it didn't exhaust his money, right? That wasn't all the money he had. He gave $55 billion or whatever, and he wasn't broke, right? So, no, dumb's not really the right word. And I think what's starting to happen in this campaign is that everyone with a lick of sense is jumping off of Kamala and onto Trump.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the thoughts I had too is just that, hark back to didn't Kamala say that people were leaving Trump rallies and stuff like that, and all that. I never saw any real proof of that. But people, and there was more context to that, what she missed, which is just that people wait hours to get to a Trump rally, and if
sit out there 10 hours and you're going to leave early, I don't think so.
Yeah. And there may be some people, may, as things go along, they may decide they need to go or whatever. But considering the amount of time they spent on that, they spend far more time waiting in line for a Trump rally and staying through a Trump rally than any Democrat does for anything, either for a Joe Biden rally or now for a Harris rally, right?
And Harris rallies. So, they have these people now that are going around and they're analyzing the cell phones that are in the rally, right? Everybody took a cell phone in the rally. They say, where do those cell phones come from and so forth? Right. That's what we're busting in attendees. And what they're finding out is that her crowds are 70 or 80% bust in, right? Unions and whatnot, Democrat organizations. Like, probably going to get this backwards, but I guess she did a rally in Vegas or somewhere near Vegas, and like 80% of the people were from California, in like LA, not just over the border, but a ways off, and were brought in by buses. So, hers is AstroTurf and inauthentic, and his is not.
Yeah, there is definitely a big difference in terms of the kind of the ground level support that these candidates have. And Harris does not do herself any favors at all. And Elon, I will continue to praise him overall. I mean, brilliant businessman. He's taken advantage of everything that the government is willing to give. He sees the advantages in all these programs, and he builds his businesses on the back of that. Whether it be the Starlink, whether it be SpaceX, Tesla, Solar City before that, all of these things, he's been able to leverage, government subsidies or tax credits to build these businesses, and he's made a lot of money off of it. And that's fine, because he's not done anything illegal. He's been perfectly legal on that.
Taking advantage of our stupidity.
Yeah, well, yeah, and he's wound up filling a niche in a lot of ways, right?
I heard somebody the other day, I guess Keith Olbermann or somebody, so we should cancel all our government contracts with Elon Musk. I'm like, fine, you have no space program. Your space program's done.
Exactly.
Real smart there.
Yeah,
go back to your basement.
Yeah, right. I mean, privatizing. You see what happens with these private operations, right? I mean, why is NASA contracting with Musk to run these little space missions and tests? Because he can do it more cost effectively and efficiently than they can.
Right.
I am much more in favor now of a space program than I was before, because I thought, I thought as a kid the space program was kind of neat. That was a kind of a neat thing. But when you saw the cost of the space program, you're like, yikes.
Yeah,
well,
and limited benefits that was coming for a while.
If Elon Musk, if Boeing can figure out their woes, if Jeff Bezos can kind of figure out how to get to Musk level, contracts and stuff like that, you will have, it's still not going to be cheap, but it'll be much more cost effective, because the government does not do things efficiently at all, or cost effectively. So private enterprise running these things, is a much better alternative if you're going to run it. So I can kind of buy into that, aspect of things. I'm still a little dubious about this big push to Mars, because it's like that's extremely expensive and takes a lot of time. But I won't. By the time they figure this out, I won't be around anymore either.
Right, and he says it's not a round trip. Right, we take you to Mars, you don't come back.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. Say goodbye to everybody. That's it. You're there.
That's it. That's the last they're going to see of you. You're going to die on Mars.
Yeah.
So
that whole thing is, but they're able to keep space exploration alive because of privatization. So good for that. And Starlink has they played a pivotal role for Ukraine, right? Helped with their infrastructure. And I think he's been running some Starlink satellites.
West North Carolina and Tennessee.
North Carolina, right?
Georgia. You have everybody a month for free.
Yeah. So I mean, and what he's done in Ukraine has not been cheap, right? I mean, he just wasn't charging for it, and at least initially, is that he wanted to make sure things would go okay. So I mean, it was costing Starlink millions and millions of dollars to provide Starlink satellites to keep Ukraine together, to keep the troops, the communication, all the things there that were going on there. So my hats off to Musk for basically using his resources and saying, I can help fix this, or at least build a bridge.
Trying to be a force for good.
Right, he is. There are problems with Elon Musk, like there would be problems with a lot of people. I think people can argue about it, but he really has. I think that's good. I think a force for good is a good way of talking about him. And I do see several of his tweets when I do go on X or Twitter, and they're pretty funny because with this election getting closer and closer, I think they're more on point than ever before. I mean,
Yeah.
What he does there, and I think I also love Sage Steele because it's like ever since she's left ESPN, it's like the shackles have come off, right?
Right.
And so she can speak her mind and do things. And it's like, wow, this is great. I love what these people are doing, and they have large followings. So, and they're reasoned people. So you can follow this, and you can say, yeah, here are the people who can explain and talk about Trump and Trump policies. Once again, kind of like JD Vance, better than Trump does. Trump gets
Right.
off the track, but here are kind of unofficial surrogates that are good for Trump.
Right.
And Elon Musk is good to fight off like a Mark Cuban.
Because what he's talking about with government efficiency would be revolutionary. He's talking about cutting the size of government down to a third of its present size. And it seems like you can't do that, but I bet you can. I bet we have more than enough computer, knowledge now to automate these jobs and get all these people off the payroll.
Well,
right?
that's the thing. I mean,
the power of government to ruin our lives,
Right. So, I mean, we started to show off with AI. In a sense, this is part of what it may be coming. I mean, Elon Musk he's got Grok in his own AI thing because there's so many AI platforms out there that you can use. I've been dabbling with Google's Gemini, for example, but there's so much out there that you put Musk on this in charge of this government commission for efficiency, right? Have him sit up there and try to look at this. He will probably look at ways of saying, okay, we can drill through a lot of those government bureaucracy, and there's a lot of stuff we can feed into the AI databases where we don't need the people anymore. There's a lot of pencil pushers that really are getting paid to do nothing but deal with documents, but aren't really contributing, to
and it's the thing about it is like when you do that, like it's not going to be popular, right? The NARF and all those people are going to come out of the woodwork. You're killing all these federal jobs. You're killing all these jobs, ruining all these families. So you need it to be a politician with no hope of being reelected, which is what Trump will be, right?
Yeah.
He won't even be eligible to run again.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if you're going to do this, this is the time to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
the need has never been greater. The consequences of not acting have never been more daunting. And you got a guy who's willing to do it. You have an expert he can bring in who has done this, right? I mean, he cut down Twitter to about 20% of the workforce when he took over.
Yeah.
And you got a guy who can't run again, he doesn't care about public opinion. I mean, this is the moment, and you can see government retrenched dramatically, which I don't think anybody would have a bad problem with.
Well, I don't know about you, but I've been waiting since the days of Reagan for smaller government. So maybe finally we might see something here if we can get Trump into the White House there, if the people will vote him in, which we'll find out in roughly 27 days. So you briefly mentioned Harris and interviews that didn't go well. So this continues a pattern. So she is going around and doing a bunch of these different interviews on various programs. I mean, the other one, I didn't put it on here, but what is it? Call her mommy, or what is it?
Call her daddy.
Call her daddy, whatever. Yeah. So that thing with, and so that is that person that's a raunchy podcast normally, right? So Kamala's on that podcast, and trying to do things. I don't think she did well on that. But then and that so there's an audience there. But then she has the 60 Minutes interview with Bill Whitaker, and that didn't go well at all because it just shows you ask her a question, she doesn't answer the question at all. Right. She comes up with this thing, and I mean
that was interesting. That interview was interesting because if you're a reporter and you're interviewing all these people, I mean, like you know, there's a separate set of rules for interviewing her. I'm sure that they get a little notice like, hey, remember, we want her to win, right? So do this, don't do that, you know. But this guy, kind of his instincts took over, and you know, he was able to say that's not an answer, right? And so he kept trying to bring her back to it, and he's like, that's not an answer, right? He called her on it. He called her on that it was just gibberish, which I think a lot, you know, that's one of those things we talked about this before. That's a permission structure. If you know, if you're sitting there watching these interviews and you're saying, you know, I don't like Trump and I'd rather not vote for him, but you know, this lady, is she really making sense? Because I hear her say these things and it doesn't sound like she ever answers a question or makes any sense, right? And so now you have a reporter, a 60 Minutes, which is supposed to be a friendly, right? I mean, I was joking people, they were like, Trump's chicken to go on 60 Minutes. I'm like, Trump went on Ingram the same day, right? What's the difference between Trump going on Ingram and Harris going on 60 Minutes? Not really much, right? You went with a friendly, okay? But you ended up with a guy who's like, wait a minute, you're not answering my question. I gave you a softball and you're not answering it, right? And then somebody finally asked her, finally got into the thing, the subject that I've been wanting to explore this whole campaign is like, how are you going to be different from Joe? Because Joe didn't do a very good job, right? The nation heading in the right direction is, you know, it's like 22 to 58, right? Or something. That's horrible. The polling is horrible on that question, right? So if you're running as a candidate, you know, who usurped Joe's plan on the place on the ballot without getting a single vote, okay, that's fine. But how much are you going to keep going with Joe, or are you going to do something else? Well, they finally started to ask that question. And, you know, she said 3 times yesterday, no, you know, on The View and to Whitaker and to Stephen Colbert last night that, you know, she's joined at the hip to Joe. Whatever Joe says, that's what we're going to do. So, you know, I think that they are afraid that Joe will crap on them if they don't say that, right? If they say anything, we've got to break with Joe on stuff, Joe's going to make a problem for her, right? He's already kind of made a couple of little problems for her. So I don't, you know, I think that publicly, you know, he's trying to say do the right thing, but I think privately he's communicating to people now that the right thing didn't happen. So, you know, it's interesting what's going on. Supposedly some of his people and some of her people got into an actual fist fight yesterday or the day before. Did you hear about this? There was like their staffers were actually throwing fists, you know? So I mean, there's a lot of tension there, and she can't go too far off the reservation. And if she doesn't go off the reservation, she can't win. So it's a tough, she's trying to do a tough thing.
Yeah, but I mean, but the answers are just so bad. I mean, they're not even answers, right? I mean,
you know, that's the thing about it is like you put her in a situation that she cannot handle, right? It's like, you know, you can give this guy any of a million powder puff fluff answers and he'll walk away, but you've got to give him an answer, right? You got to give him something he can look in the mirror and say, I got an answer out of her.
Yeah, I mean, at least I thought she would just try to cover herself by saying, you know, I plan to have an opportunity economy. She's talked about that, right? Enjoy opportunity economy, you know, what she wants to do for business, you know, all these different things, you know, an increased child tax care credit. I thought she would use that. She doesn't even know her own policy, her own platform to be able to sit in an interview. It's not here so that she can actually spout that off. There's no teleprompter to say, oh, here are your bullet points. And so without that, she's left to try to, well, you know, we live in a country that, you know, where that these values or whatever, you know, she goes off on these little tangents and she tries to paint this picture. And there's nothing. It has no relation.
If she doesn't know what to say, you'll see that hand movement.
Right, exactly. Right?
You see that when some BS is coming, right? A big high steaming pile is on the way out.
Right. And so she does this over and over again. She has this hand motion. She tries to be, you know, how a little coy or whatever, you know, this is what we want to do, you know, paint this picture of this without ever answering the question. It's like, if you are a voter, if you are a, if you are a reasonable, you know, intelligent voter, right? You're watching, if you watch any of these programs, you know, at all, you've got to say, what the heck is this? I mean,
Yeah,
where's
there's
the
no
answer?
there at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, I mean, she shares a beer with Colbert, right, last night or something like that, trying to, I guess, be all folksy, and all this kind of stuff.
Well, also, I guess you saw Saturday Night Live did a skit of her. It was her and her husband watching the Tim Walz debate, right? And
I
she's
saw that clip.
getting hammered, right, while she's watching it, right? And so, I mean, there is a talk about her being an alcoholic, talking about her, having a drinking problem. There has been for years on Capitol Hill that, you don't see her in the daytime because she's smashed. So, I don't know. I mean, it'd be kind of hard to be president and be smashed. I mean, the job's kind of grown since, the days of Jerry Ford, who was probably the last president who did a whole lot of drinking in the White House. So I don't know. I don't know how they do that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about those types of rumors, and I'm not going to go down that path at this point. But I will say that since you brought up that skit was hilarious because they're watching this thing, they're watching Walls, and she breaks the glass, right? She's holding her drinking glass, and it's just like the whole thing. She just it's like whoa, and yeah, it's great. I mean, and Dana Carvey comes in there as Biden. I got this campaign, has brought back some of these people to reprise these roles because it's just too juicy to ignore. So that Harris and Biden, are as much a target as Trump would be. It's great television. I mean, that's one thing. At least have a sense of humor. So that's good with all of this. But it is kind of devastating because I mean, the Saturday Night Live audience, not exactly filled with a lot of young conservatives in all likelihood, right? I mean, it's not, their content is really not, geared towards conservative audiences, and they take a poke at these guys, and I'm like, okay, you have definitely seen the same flaws that a lot of other people have.
Right, you're that spoofable that Saturday Night Live is getting you.
Yeah, if you can do that, you've got some problems to deal with. Which also says, where we've seen, over the last few weeks, we had this Harris in the poly market, the betting market, the main betting market. She had taken the lead from Trump and had been at 50, 51. Then I think last week it was about 50-50. And now Trump has flipped. The betting is now flipped to Trump. The momentum is where Trump's got, it's like 53, and change, and she's at 46. Yeah, right. So it moves. It's like a stock market. It moves up and down, but the shift has been that's a pretty big shift when it goes like that. Every time it flips like that, that's a big shift. But with 26 days to go before election day, that I would be a little bit concerned at in terms of saying, like, here's another piece of where we can see momentum. The polls still has a tight, but I see a lot more of the polling that shows that that Trump may have a slim 1 or 2 point lead in places where he was trailing before. So there's a lot.
Some of those Senate races catching up. They moved. Cook Political Report moved the Senate race in Wisconsin between Tammy Baldwin and Eric Hobdy from leans Democrat to toss-up, which is she's lost her lead. Right? She was 10, 12 points ahead, and she's lost the lead. It's hard to believe that she's in trouble and Harris is not in Wisconsin. Right? It's hard to believe Harris is not in trouble in Michigan when the Muslims seem to be for Trump. It's hard to believe. I mean, I think that they're pretty close to giving up on Pennsylvania, given the voter registration, the early ballot requests. I think Scott Presler has flipped 4 counties now from majority Democrat to majority Republican. In Arizona, the Republicans netted 7,000 netted. That means they had more than the Democrats by 7,000 registrations just last weekend. They're now something like 219,000 ahead. They were behind in 2020. They were about 100,000 behind now. So that's more than 300,000 to the good for Republicans in Arizona. Those people are not signing up as Republicans to vote for Harris, right? So it looks like Georgia is going to be safely Trump. She has a chance in Nevada. She has a chance in Michigan, obviously. And I'll admit, like the trends look Trump in Wisconsin, but that's a state that's very hard to poll for a variety of reasons. And so you may not, but Wisconsin generally does almost exactly on percentages what Pennsylvania does. So if Pennsylvania is flowing toward Trump, which all the leading indicators suggest is the case, then probably Wisconsin is too.
Yeah, so it'll be. I mean, we still have a few weeks to go here, but it's going to be interesting. And once again, every day that we get closer is also we're seeing, more early voting coming up, more of the mail-in ballots coming up. So there are votes that are being cast as we speak.
Votes being cast, and there's ballots being requested. So, like one of the points that the Republicans make is, some of the polls favor her, right? That's people saying something, who will you vote for? But when it comes to doing something, registering or actually voting or requesting an early ballot, then he's got a good point. I'll talk about in just a sec. Those things are markedly Republican. The Republicans have a big advantage on that. In Florida, obviously, Trump was 10 or 12 points ahead. There was a poll out yesterday, so I don't worry about so much of him winning Florida. North Carolina is closer. They went down there. I thought it was interesting too. They established a bunch of new voting sites, right, to help the people in the areas that were affected by the hurricane. And in the old days, by the old days, I mean 3 or 4 years ago, before the Voting Rights Act was curtailed by the courts, right, there would have been a pre-clearance provision of that. They would have had to get permission from the Department of Justice to establish these new voting sites, because the way it worked was anytime you moved a voting site in any way in one of the states that was, the states of the Confederacy, and I think there's 2 or 3 other states where, that had a quote history of racism or whatever, you had to present it for pre-clearance to DOJ to see, make sure that it was in compliance with the Voting Rights Act. So they don't have to do this, which is good, because you could see the Democrats just squeezing their shoes on it, because they're already squeezing their shoes on when and how to vote and what they will do to help them in those affected areas.
Okay, all right. This is as good as time as any to wrap it up. So
start getting out of here. All right,
yeah.
let's see what you have here that we didn't do. Google breakup. I don't know that. I do want to talk about this. So CBS Morning News, the guy Dokoupil, right? He kind of went after, asked some tough questions of Ta-Nehisi Coates, who is just a race grifter of the first order. And the network got mad at him for it. For, hey, he's one of our favorite guys, so don't be mean to him. So if that's the way they're going to treat it, I mean, that's of all these media organizations, CBS has kind of taken its place as the most biased, the most willing to be mean and aggressive with their bias of the big 3. And that's even with, David Muir at being at ABC.
Yeah. Well, the thing that gets me about that, though, is just that, the head of CBS News is kind of like, we have a long history of being, fair and impartial, unbiased. And like, where have you been?
When did that start?
Please point that out to me. I don't understand this at all. Amazing. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I do want to throw one more thing out there, and that is another we had another death in baseball. The great Louis Tiant. Amazing pitcher and everything. But I'm running out of time, so I'm going to say thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe as always. Don't let anyone tell you we live in the greatest country in the world. Don't let them tell you otherwise. So what happens on our teleprompter. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.